I could never imagine hiring somebody. Even when I started doing the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast and I needed to bring on a virtual assistant, I had candidates through Upwork come through and I made sure they filled out a PI. Like, why am I going to take a chance without having somebody take the assessment tool? Let's find out what I'm getting myself involved with. I don't think there's a company that could be too small to use a tool.
No, our smallest client, I think, is 4 employees. But once again, they appreciate it because they need to understand how to work together better.
Yes. And especially as we grow, it just becomes increasingly more difficult. The challenge becomes enormous to keep that culture in place. Yeah. When I was starting out and when I had 4, 5, 6 people, yeah, it's easy to add the 7th and 8th. But once you start getting over 10, 11, 12 people, you can easily have the fabric of the culture start being torn apart because of different personalities. And back to your point about having people that complement one another, you're not looking for all the same people, but you want to engage with people that are going to be a right fit culturally. And the bigger you get, bigger challenge is going to be.
Yeah, and your culture is such a buzzword out there at the moment, but it's true. And so someone once said to me, your culture, you can have all the best things on your website going and big signs in your entrance hall, but your culture is what you accept.
Yes. I heard from one of these business coaches shared his definition of culture. He says, culture is how we treat one another.
Yeah, true on that. And so, understanding each other better helps with that culture because we're not all the same and nor do we want to be, but understanding that this member of my team likes a lot more detail than is my natural style or likes to think things through and works at a slightly slower pace than is my natural style. Just helps us interact better.
For sure.
So, very, very powerful tool, particularly as you're building a team.
Right.
On that. Because to your point, once you start hitting sort of 8 or 9 plus employees, it starts to get tough.
It gets dicey. Yeah, for sure. You're going to make a mistake.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I challenge all the time whenever I'm speaking is like, anyone in this room made a bad hire, and the one person does to put their hand up. I'm like, so you've never hired anyone, obviously. We all make mistakes. And that's once again comes back to it. It's using data to take those personal biases out of the conversation.
I want you to share something that you talked about actually before we started recording the podcast. And that was about companies that our clients, they go against what the science tells them because they've got that gut feeling. My instinct tells me, Mike, I need to hire this person. How does that usually go?
Yeah, we joke internally that virtually every client has to go through this.
It's a rite of passage.
Yeah, almost. We sort of smile. Like you'll be there, having coffee or having just on a Zoom meeting with them, chatting with them, and everything else, and they'll go like, "Yeah, we hired this guy, and his behavioural data showed us that he wasn't a match, but we just really liked him, and he interviewed great, and so we hired him." And I always go, and what? And I'm like, "Yeah, we let him go last week." Because they are who they are.
Sure.
And to your point, the best of him showed up at the interview, but 3 weeks into it, it was like
the real him showed up on the afterwards.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that fateful day when we first met. I think we met as a result of one of my top performing franchisees, Steve Cox in Columbus, Ohio, and suggested that we talk with you guys. And why don't we share how that meeting went? We met in a Starbucks.
Yeah, that was a red flag for us straight away, actually.
Our building was under construction, so we couldn't meet in the office. So it was me and I brought just a few members of my team. Now, we had done PI before our meeting, so you knew what you were going in with before you met us.
And as I said to you, why wouldn't I do that?
That's right.
I mean, I constantly shout at my team over this, is we should never be having a conversation with anyone without having their behavioural assessment in front of us. I mean, talk about an unfair advantage.
That is truly unfair because it's one-sided because I don't have your PI.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not going to let you have it. No. So the then founder of Predictive Results, Steve Waterhouse, who got me into Predictive Index in the first place, and I was sat in this Starbucks, which was just around the corner from where I lived at the time. Mm-hmm. and you walked with your team and everything, and we all said hi and introduced. And I'd like to claim it was me, but it wasn't. It was Steve.
Was it Steve?
Yeah.
So I reached out. I shook Steve's hand. I said, "Hi, my name is Frank Fumey," and his response was,
"You're unemployable." and what was wonderful,
he said hello. I don't think. I think his response was, "You're unemployable."
Yeah, but there was this gasp from your team. I remember your team all looking at each other, going, "Who are these guys?"
Right, a bunch of clowns.
Yeah, and even I was like, but you laughed because you got it, and it was true, and
it was true. I am unemployable,
which is why you're an entrepreneur,
right?
And I'm very much the same sort of thing. But yeah, then Steve went on to talk about you. The fact that your natural style is you're very informal, you're flexible, you're certainly independent, you're assertive, you're people orientated, you're outgoing, you're restless, you're driving. But what does that mean that you need? Well, it means you need freedom from structure. You like independence. You need to control your own activities. You like opportunities to interact and to influence. And you like variety and an opportunity to work at a faster than average pace. We knew that about you before you even walked in through that door. So it gave us a huge amount of power. So yeah, perfect entrepreneurial material. You're not going to be happy, are you, sat in a cubicle doing spreadsheets? So,
interesting.
I mean, isn't it? So understanding that about you was critical. So, which is why I knew Steve could make that comment with, well, yeah, basically, you're never going to fit into the corporate world, so it's just as well you started your own business. But, we knew that from the data we had in front of you. But where it then becomes useful is helping you then build that team. And I've had the pleasure of working with you and Brian and everyone else for, well over a decade now. And, I'll credit you that, and you might disagree with me on this, but I think the most sensible thing you ever did was hire Brian.
There's no question about it.
No
question about it. I agree with you.
Because he compliments you. And that's what I speak all the time when I'm speaking to franchisors or franchisees or anyone trying to build a team, particularly startups, is number one, understand who you are. So understand your very fast pace. You're a big picture guy. You will drive the team. But then don't go out and hire another you. Hire someone who brings to the table what you don't have. But you don't know that unless you can actually map that against the individuals. So, we spend a lot of time helping organizations put together teams. And there's nothing more terrifying for me than, and I had this just recently with a startup, an IT company startup, and the entire management team were all the same.
Oh, gosh.
And it was terrifying because they're all patting themselves on the back going, aren't we great? And I'm going, actually, no, slow down here. You need some process, you need some precision, and you're very innovative, you're very agile, you're great at big picture stuff, and you're having 900 great ideas a day, but is anyone writing them down? They were like, no. So, yeah, it was but the story about Steve's very first words to you about being, "Hi, you're unemployable," has gone down in legend somewhat amongst our team.
Oh, it is. Yeah, I was taken back, but I certainly took it in good fun. And the truth is, it was right. He was 100% right. Here's another thing, though, that during that small meeting we had, I think it was me and about 3 or 4 others from the company. And as you read one of the other members of my management team's PI, you then start talking about our relationship with one another. And if I recall, it was a lady who was in charge of the customer service center, a great gal, super smart, great leader. But what you said to me was, Frank, when you give her accolades publicly in a group, it embarrasses her. You picked up on that through the PI, and she turned like 15 shades of red when you said that. And she was shaking her head, yes. And I would have never thought in a million years by me saying something great about her and giving her a compliment in a group meeting that it would embarrass her.
Because we tend to see the world through our own eyes.
Okay.
So those of us who like the public accolades, well, surely everyone else likes the public accolades, but when we measure that extroversion drive, I talked about that need for social interaction, there are people who are low in that drive. There are people who are very comfortable being heads down on their own. There are people who are quite happy, they love remote work. I mean, COVID has changed the world for all of us dramatically. But we've seen particularly around that drive is, there are those people who say you are now going to work from home, and they're like, yes, I never have to speak to anyone ever again. And that they're happy with that. And there's other people on the other end of that spectrum who that's terrifying for. So you understanding or being told that about that individual, because you would naturally want to give them praise how you like to receive praise.
Right. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.